Thanks, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Welcome to the Q&A session. Closer? Okay, too loud. Thanks for coming to the Q&A session, and thanks for the viewers at home and abroad. I would like to welcome our panel of experts here, who will first take some questions that were posted on Twitter, and then questions from the audience here and at home, wherever, who are watching. And hopefully that can instigate some debate and new ideas and new thoughts about digital engineering studies and what is the purpose or possible purpose of such a network that we're trying to initiate here. And I think you agree with me that the talks up till now were very invigorating and part of ideas and new kinds of research that are going on. And this is very interesting. I just want to introduce them quickly. Professor Niek Veldhuis is Professor of Assyriology at UC Berkeley, member of the ORAC Steering Committee, and Senior Fellow of the Berkeley Institute of Data Science. He is one of the pioneers in adopting computational methods for the study of other languages, and has published widely on Sumerian, Akkadian, scribal education, history of writing, hermeneutics, and many other topics. Among his recent important projects on digital Assyriology, one can note his computational Assyriology Jupyter book, as well as another Jupyter book with Adam Anderson, who is here, and many collaborators on Sumerian social networks. Elise-Sophia Lincke, who we heard earlier today, is Junior Professor of Digital Philology and Data Science of the Languages of the Ancient World in the FU Berlin. Her expertise is in Egyptian culture and languages. Her interest in digital humanities grew in the course of a dissertation on spatial relations in the Saitic dialect of Coptic, when she worked on semi-automatic text digitalization methods. This led her to a postdoc in the Göttingen Center for Digital Humanities. She was also the lexicographer at the project Database and Dictionary of Greek Loanwords in Coptic. Hubert, a co-conspirator, is a junior professor of humanities at the Institute of Computer Science at the University of Halle. He's an editor-in-chief of the IT Information Technology Journal series published by De Gruyter, one of the oldest computer science journals in Germany. The core of his work is the development of new analysis, representation, and research methods for archaeological finds, such as the age determination of 3D captured cuneiform tablets with AI. Starting with Gigamesh, he has done foundational work in these areas. Since 2016, he has served at the advisory board of the German chapter of the Computer Application and Quantitative Methods in Archaeology. And last but not least, Hendrick Hameeuw, right? Works at the KU Leuven in the ULS Digitalization and Document Delivery and Department of Ancient History. He's in charge of advanced imaging techniques, especially with regard to ancient artifacts from the Near East. He's also affiliated researcher with the Royal Museums of Art and History at Brussels and the University of Ghent. Among his current projects is the Cuneiforum IIIF, which we heard earlier, which integrates the International Image Interoperability Framework into the Rimach collection of Old Babylonian clay tablets. So thank you for coming. And I just have, first, I'll read the questions from the Twitter. And I'll read the names also. Louis Spraik, who I don't know exactly their affiliation at the moment. I'd be curious for ideas and recommendations about how to manage the developments in AI, such as ChatGPT, in ancient and recent journals and conferences. For example, will we need policies about content, such as abstracts, created with, by AI, and who decides this?
It's working, right? Yeah. I'm absolutely unconcerned about these kinds of things. I use ChatGPT in my classes. So I have a class on Babylonian religion for undergraduates, and they know nothing about the ancient Near East. And so we're in the 4th week of that class, and we're talking about Marduk. And I tell them, for your homework, you're going to ask ChatGPT a question about Marduk. You can make up a question of your liking, and then you're going to criticize the results. And that actually works very nicely, so they come up with interesting things. Sometimes the answers from ChatGPT are really right on the mark, and sometimes it's just wild. But as a sparring partner, I think it's really nice. But I'm not at all concerned that ChatGPT will be used for writing scholarly articles. That would be very, very obvious.
Television killed the radio star, isn't that a song? So it's one of these other technologies which is popping up, and we'll have to cope with it. We'll have to learn how to work with all of that. And in the last couple of weeks, I guess it was in many countries across the world like that, suddenly it was hitting the news on a daily basis. And it's going to be, once again, a new technology. We have to try to understand what it does, what it doesn't. One of the things we already said during lunch is it's not creating actually content, it's just creating words, and we have to understand how we have to deal with all of that. And like the song says, the radio stars had to be really, really scared of it. But at the end, we're all still listening radio, and we kind of, it's each time the same with new kind of technologies. Yes, it looks scary from a certain moment, and now I guess at all of our home institutions, every home institution starts sending out emails, what to do, what not to do, but it's, some of them look like half in panic, some others kind of, they did ask somebody like Niek, who actually already uses it in classes, and then they are already less and less panicking. So we can work with these kind of things, and I guess most of our institutions actually will come up with solutions, how to embed it, how to find the boundaries. And this is it's not the first, of course, there are already many of these kind of AI approaches where you can do very flexible things with, and new will come, others will come, it will adapt to other systems and so on. So we'll have to try to work with it, but at this moment, if you ask me, what do you think? Niek was very positive, yeah. I'm kind of very curious indeed to see what the impact will be once it starts being used all over, not only for our field of assyriology. I'm sure we will find good ways to, as the posters can already show here, we find good ways for new technologies to be useful for a very specific field like assyriology, but of course it will have an impact on everything. Yeah? And that's another thing, of course. Society will have to be able to deal with these new technologies. But for our field itself, then I would follow Niek immediately in saying, yes, if it is about pinpointing it specifically to our research field, it will be in our benefit.
Now that my talk is over, I can admit it. I was very late with my abstract, and I wrote an abstract in the crappy English that I write, and then I pasted it into ChatGPT and said, make nice academic English out of it. And it did, and I was happy, and I could finally send it to Luis. So, so I find it useful. And also I think that if you adapt the assignments that you give to the students, it can be a very helpful tool in class. However, I also think that what will happen is that students or other people copy-paste Wikipedia and other stuff that they find on the internet and ask ChatGPT to change the phrasing and to shorten it to the right length, and then they will hand it in. I think that will happen.
No, so much correct things have been said, so it's well, maybe the legal question would be interesting, but there would be the lawyer, and definitely what will happen is if we put our data openly on the web, ChatGPT or the future version will incorporate and learn from it, so we can make it more clever and probably get then Akkadian GPT or Sumerian.
You're getting ahead of the questions. Andrew De Lucas, a PhD from Harvard University, I believe, has two questions. To what extent are tools like relational database managers being utilized for other projects, and how might those new to this sort of methodology learn what can be accomplished through them? And I can also, as a second question, I can remind you then afterwards, how are we supporting, maybe it's related, how are we supporting advanced digital literacy for students within our field, in addition to their expected historical and linguistic studies? What are we expecting of those students, researchers, or international projects that is different than decades before?
Well, maybe I answer partially for the database managers. Well, in mostly Central European area, libraries are jumping on this topic. They're trying to collect the data or build some infrastructure, support with legal questions. So this is a very dynamic field. There's a lot of things going on. Also jobs are opening there as well in this area. So it's lively. It will develop positively. So yeah, seems to be a good thing going on. So I'm not sure if about the other things. One of the colleagues wants to answer.
Yeah, I think for the data literacy, may I come to that question already? Well, as those who have heard my talk know that I implement that in my teaching already. And I think the problem will be the allocation of resources on the part of the students, so their time while they are studying with us. Because of course, if they do classes and whole modules on data literacy, they may skip other classes. And this is actually the real debate that we have in Berlin, that my colleagues are concerned that the students will lack the language knowledge and cultural knowledge, so the knowledge of the sources that they need to then make something meaningful with the new methods that they learn. And this is something that, well, in these very restricted frameworks of academic curricula, you cannot address. People can only make up for it by devoting more time to studying and maybe also to stay at the university longer, which the universities, of course, don't want. Yeah, and to continue learning afterwards, of course, in workshops, conferences, in digital humanities labs like the one we are sitting next to. But I think it should be integrated into the curriculum at BA level to make them aware that these topics exist and to gain their interest for them.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree, first of all. But of course, it's once again another kind of competence which is coming on top of what we are already expecting. So lifelong learning is becoming more and more kind of what we have to follow, and universities, libraries, for example, in particular, whether it is a university library or a public library, will play more and more, I think, crucial roles in this, because these new technologies, one of the things, and I guess everybody who is also teaching can kind of also sees that it's not that the newest generations of students are, by definition, have an easier way to step into this digital world at all. That's not really how it works, because there's so much out there, and everybody, once they turn 18, 19, they're already for 10, 15 years in that digital world, but they have followed a specific path. And of course, there's so many other things. So when you're at the university, one of the things which immediately then pop up, do we have to prolong the programs? From 3 years bachelor and 3 years masters, but then funding is of course a problem. So I kind of think that these kind of open initiatives, I don't know how open the Digital Humanities Lab in this case is, but that we more and more have to make sure that these kind of initiatives are open to the public we're trying to reach, and to make sure that there are also very competent people over there who kind of have the overview. Because that is, I think, one of, if you ask me what are the solutions for a specific problem, I kind of have to dig in the kind of systems I know. Yeah, and it is absolutely crucial that people who are connected to these kind of digital humanity labs, or whatever it might be that we will come up with in the future, are the people who have an overview that they can really pinpoint to which kind of systems and all the solutions which are possible, which would actually do something for that specific question. So it's one of the biggest goals I think we have to set, and we have to make sure it becomes part of the policy of our universities or libraries, that they are very well aware of it. And by the way, I think many of them are. It's not it's not saying that we're not, but it's going to be very important. Yeah.
I have a question myself for the SCU. Do you already have a summer school for digital methods in your field?
Yeah, so in Uppsala we had a summer school for assyriology students who were interested in digital methods, and we had courses on Python and using different software like GIS, satellite imaging software, and making like SNA and stuff like that. And the plan is to have similar summer school in Helsinki this year. I think it's going to be in August, mid-August this year. So it's still unofficial information, but it's been planned. It's on our plan. Yeah.
Platform thank you. Of Danes specifically, but I mean, that's one of the reasons to do this network exactly, is to make everyone know that these initiatives are going on and that we're trying to get everyone more digital literate, especially from the perspective that we just discussed. Another point maybe that I think is could be raised is the issue of having more, and of course that's a different complication, have statistical and mathematical training that's related to this kind of analysis, especially since, as we saw today, a lot of these machine learning models or language models like ChatGPT are basically opaque about what are they using, what are they giving us as a result, because they're just completing sentences and providing text which is somewhere in their database. And if you want to maybe dive deeper into what we are seeing in these graphs and visualizations that we are producing, we should understand more about the statistics and mathematics behind them, not necessarily on the level of a mathematician, but to some extent in a way that we can deal with it.
Yeah, I totally second that, because I actually had that problem myself. I'm starting to work with stylometric methods, and I wanted to understand the statistics behind it. And I tried to find a statistics class. And then Freie Universität has a grade, it's called FUStat, so it has some kind of institution where you can take crash courses, and I did, but I was the only one without pre-knowledge. Everyone else in the class was PhD student who had statistics classes before and just tried to brush up. So of course, I mean, I did not understand much. I would not be able to use anything of what I have learned there. And then I tried to find a class that is less crash. And I failed, because then you have to go to the normal university courses, which is 4 hours a week. That is a bit difficult if you have a position already and other stuff to do. So something in between would be really great. So that is a request to the people who are able to do that. Please do. I would totally join.
Hi, I'm Matthew from the REL. So, I mean, part of the work I did kind of involved the same thing, in the sense that you hear about tools like ChatGPT, or even what a neural model is, or maybe not what a neural model is, but how does, you know, these things of the convolutional networks, all these sort of terms, and you sort of, there's a level of presentation you can sort of see on lots of humanities talks, which is sort of superficial, that would tell you maybe what you could do, but yeah, it doesn't really tell you what I think are the nuts and bolts. And although it's true I do have something of a technical background, I think it would be possible for a number of people, say, on YouTube, say, there are televised, like the Stanford NLP lectures, I found to be fairly accessible, because they are, like, they do actually go through things in nuts and bolts wise, but they are aimed at students who are learning it for the first time. And I think that, you know, there's a whole range of lectures and presentations, and then I'll kind of sort of say, I'll take you through the nuts and bolts of something. Some of them really suck because they really are just the guy writing it to just say something, and others are sort of well thought out pedagogical presentations. So, you know, of course we do need those humanities seminars or whatever, but right now, for some things there are available that, I don't know what the statistical class, how much of a crash course it is compared to what I'm thinking of, but there are actually, I think, presentations and even like blogs that would take you through how to build your own GPT. Admittedly, they require some knowledge of Python, but really, you kind of learn how to do it, and that's where, you know, some of the understanding comes from.
Well, I do think it is important to distinguish between different levels of data literacy. So on one level, I think that you know, the ability to use basic tools such as CDLI and ORAC and so on, those are things that we have to integrate in our teaching. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Those are things that we have to integrate in our teaching the same way that 30 years ago we would integrate in the teaching how to use a library or how to use a dictionary and a grammar. To go the way of data analysis and of large-scale data analysis, I don't think that is for everybody. There will be some students who are interested in doing that, and there will also be students who want to stay far away from that. So I don't think that we necessarily need to integrate that kind of teaching into the teaching of Assyriology or Egyptology, but that there should be ways for students to pursue such roads if they are interested in that. So universities need to have institutes for developing that kind of data literacy. But I don't think that is necessarily the responsibility of teaching Sumerian in my case, or Egyptian in your case.
What might be a good thing is that you at least teach that there is computer science out there, raise awareness, yeah, and there are groups working on it.
Are you going to teach that there is Sumerian out there?
No, and also that you have to learn to talk to computer scientists, programmers, engineers. I think this is maybe the key thing you have to learn. If you're really not interested into digital methods, you should be able to talk to digital people. This is maybe like a minimum requirement.
A couple of years ago, I had a project, and one of the PhD students on it was like, it was a pretty DH-oriented project, and one of the PhD students on it was like diagonally the other way than actually DH. Yeah? So all the tools we were actually using, he was like completely not interested at all. He didn't see any interest in it whatsoever. Just before summer, we had a conference with him. And suddenly he's also, when you ask him, what about digital humanities? No, all these applications, nothing for me. I'm an art historian, that's where my focus lays. And he was showing his presentation, and he said, yeah, here I found a depiction, a graphic depiction on the inside of a book. Yeah, and I didn't find any parallels, but then, yeah, I dropped it into Google Lens, and immediately I had 10 different parallels. And so after the talk, I went to him, I said, congratulations, you finally made your turn to the digital humanities, and he didn't lay the link actually. And I thought that was a very interesting moment, because he used the tool, he didn't even associate anymore with. But there is a lot of technology behind there. Eh? What we've been talking here today is to make uniform signs recognizable by algorithms. And actually that is exactly what a common tool, because he kind of saw that as a common tool, nothing to do with high tech at all, because everybody is using Google somehow on a daily basis. Yeah? So I think sometimes we also have to understand there is a time effect, and it's yes, the technology we are discussing here today is the one which is putting the horizon further and further and further, and not everybody will immediately jump on it, but it will come. Yeah. Surely once all these kind of apps and possibilities are integrated into the systems we're using on a daily basis, it will come. So I would say companies who think who can earn money with all of this will make sure that they lower the threshold to use all of it. Yeah.
I think that's those are super interesting points, and especially taking into account how we progress in using this kind of technology, whether it's with the computer, as you describe it, or computational-wise, actually coding it into some interface that for me, who grew up in the 80s and 90s, it's like a DOS interface. That looks great, right? But that's very, very cool. But if you show it to someone else, like, you know, there's a whole discussion in the age, it's not really related maybe, but a general one. Should we start from teaching them bash commands, right? Writing codes into this black screen. And this scares people immensely. But it's funny, but it sounds funny, and this is how we would used to work with the computer before. Now we're working with the computer on a much more interactive level, and the next level is what Michael showed us today, is this actually manipulating things in space and really, or also, you know, going far away from this. And with the cuneiform tablets and other artifacts, these are exactly the things we are wanting to go back to. We're wanting to manipulate them physically as well. So this is again the issue of a very interesting one of what tools are we using, and what are we using beyond the tools, and what are we teaching beyond the tools, and so on. So that's I think this is exactly the thing that the university will have to deal with, and not just universities, but they will have to deal with today in order to teach people this if they're not coming with this from school already. Perhaps this will be something in school in general. I guess this is, I mean, I see my children, but also other children learning more and more interactivity in the programming in the school already from a very young age. So for them it would be already something totally different. If you tell them to write something in Python, it would look very familiar to them. So yeah. Now questions and remarks from the audience, and also the audience at home through the YouTube, I think. But please feel free to.
Hey, Nathan Steinmeier from here at Tel Aviv. As someone who is working a little bit in digital humanities, but mostly just uses the resource that you incredible people create, one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of these programs use different platforms, they talk about things in slightly different ways, and going back and forth between all of these different resources, they end up being very difficult for someone to use who isn't incredibly aware of this very specific platform and resource. Is that something that in the near future digital humanities is going to start paying more attention to? Is that something that is being worked on now? What is kind of the mindset of researchers like you when it comes to usability of your platform?
Yeah, so sounds like the computer scientist has to answer this one. Well, if you work on the computer science department, you also have to do research, and making a nice user interface is nothing you get usually money for it. So this is kind of the big gap, and this question shows up quite often. The good thing is that, at least in Germany, they start a bit of funding that they say if you have a research tool, which is nice, so you can show you have a certain community, then you can get money to actually fix these things. But this recently started, we have to see how this is working out. But it will rarely happen because computer science departments are not used to produce something with a nice interface. Yeah. Probably also a thing to start like a community effort, but this is a really hard thing to do. We have also our own software, and didn't manage to find a lot of people which contribute to the software, improve it, which are not part of our group or our direct project partner. So this big software can do this, small ones is a really hard task.
Yeah, I can answer that question, I think, in two rather different ways. Answer one would be get used to it. You know, we used to work with Akadisches Handwörterbuch and Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, and you had to have two different skill sets to use those two, right? And so you use CDLI and you use ORAC, and you need different skill sets to use them. And that's not going to get better, it's going to get worse, because we will have more different projects all over the world, and they will all want to invent the wheel, and so they're all going to do it slightly differently. And I think what the responsibility is of professors is to use all of those projects in class and show how they work and how they work differently, and let you make errors and then get back to that and say, no, in this particular database you have to do it such and so. So that's answer one. Then answer two, I think, is if we go to data representations where we use IDs for all kinds of different things, then it becomes easier to make cross-references between different databases. And right now that is still sort of, you know, music for the future, as you would say in Dutch. But I think that is a possible way to go, that where one project may say Ataru and another project may say Wataru, that we can have, you know, a single identifier that points to both of those. Perhaps that will make things easier in the future.
And better documentation. Better documentation. I mean, I think we all have the problem that we always run out of time and never finish the documentation. I'm guilty of that. But I struggle with it. So I go on GitHub, I try to install something, like the installation recommendations is one line, pip install Nödelne, and then I do that, something goes wrong, it doesn't work, and then the Googling starts. And yeah, if you are lucky, someone answers in the forum. Very often they do not know the answer, since I'm a Mac user and they are never on Mac. And you know, so on the next level you struggle with the same questions, and I think, yeah, mutual support on forums and better documentation would already be a step ahead.
I partly endorse the get used to it thing, because yes, there are many projects. Luckily, there's still a lot of money for all of those projects, and it will keep systems where indeed sometimes only the engineer who actually came up with the system truly understands what the system is about. There's also another approach, and partly of my time I'm working at the libraries of my university, and they have a strategy which is not that flexible. Also, if you want to change something in their system, it's very slow, because if they change somewhere, open a gate or close a gate, it has implementations for all of their system. Yeah? So it's, you need a lot of meetings, a lot of discussing what to do. But if you kind of make sure that from time to, and not for each project which comes up with these new kind of solutions, that is something you can do. But for some of them, actually, that is possible, is to collaborate with those kind of institutions. In my case, it's the library. It opens up the possibility, actually, to make sure that the exercise you did, it is incorporated into a much larger system, which will also continue, to update it, because that is, they have a crew of people who are working on it each time to cope with the new updates which are necessary to go further with the new technologies. So that is an approach maybe from time to time we should look at more often. There are already a number of big systems. We have that at our own institutions. You have them intra and inter institutions as well. In our field, we have examples, ORAC, CDLI, there are a number of examples. Sometimes we kind of complain because they are low-tech. They are not easy to adapt to the newest of the newest, but then nonetheless they will evolve as well. And yeah, I think if it is possible to kind of connect your results with these kind of systems, it is a strategy which sometimes maybe, is it the funder, is it the project manager who should push those kind of results a bit more into these systems which do make it probably on the longer term. Because yeah, we keep having the problem that a lot of energy is being spent. Papers are being published because we're scientists. That is kind of what we have to do. We have to publish our results. Yeah? But then sometimes the final publication is a dead end. And 10 years later, someone on a conference says, yeah, but actually somebody already did that 10 years ago, and everybody is like, never saw that paper, didn't know what he's talking. And so if you incorporate it into existing systems, and then the hard thing about that is always, if you do that, you will not be able, as the one who is leading the project or has conducted all of the results, you won't be able to put everything in it, because those larger, more lock systems, they won't be able to do that. So yeah, you have to find a balance there, but that might be a solution for all of these people who kind of see that and see those codes and don't even, you can go to GitHub, but it doesn't mean because you know GitHub that you immediately, for all these many different projects are there, it takes you sometimes a couple of days to truly understand, okay, what is this GitHub actually offering? Yeah? And solutions will pop up. From that point of view, I'm very positive.
Thank you. If I can just add one thing on the issue of sustainability, which is very big in discussions on projects and long-term sustainability, not just GitHub, but in general of these websites that eventually some of them die out or disappear or are not functional, links die or go to this graveyard, the big graveyard in the cloud, as we don't know where it is. There are some projects dealing with this problem, specifically targeting the issue of sustainability, like the ENDS project, the Endings project, which gives you a protocol of how to end the life of your project in a way that is dignified and will let you also use it or reuse it in the future. Sorry that came out in this way, but that was that's how it's. I think it's structured on the website. But generally speaking, there is a discussion about this and an ongoing discussion. So this will only, I think, on this respect, it will get better. And of course, there are new formats all the time, new technologies which will make it with. So it's a kind of, yeah, it will never outweigh the technology, but it will get better from the fact that you could maybe reuse older things eventually. So.
You just said? Well, because you're talking about sustainability, you also have to split into data and software. And so there's this nice saying, data is like red wine and software is like fish, and they age very differently if you put them on storage. So this is, so the maybe important thing is that you should really take care about your data, that this somehow survives, because the software is probably dead after like 3 or 4 years.
That's a very good analogy. And fitting maybe to, oh, Michael. Yes.
Maybe just to add a couple of words, because I think that's this idea of software and kind of a novelty of this on the tools. So I'm on a little bit different side, because on the side of creating the tools, or trying to kind of bring the user experience design, exactly kind of interfaces which are operational. It's rather unthankful job, because you're not getting much funding for the things. It's not the novelty of the things. It's really hard testing, updates, this side of things. Given the small budgets, it's something where you usually really not want to end up. So that's one side. The other flip side of the coin is also that if it becomes already too popular as a tool, if the tool becomes too accessible to many people, it kind of pretty much like Hendrick's example with the Google image find. It becomes so obvious, it's fulfilled its function, it's taken for granted, it starts not being a new tool. It's basically the repertoire of everyday usage. So it's not more a tool which brings something completely new. So it is kind of this get used to it, yes, in many ways. If you if you are interested in trying to develop it further and make it accessible to other people, it's probably really trying to consolidate what is already there with the understanding that you always will be catching up, because the platforms are changing, expectations are changing. It's basically a race which, in many ways, I think from my perspective, as kind of designer, you cannot win. That's maybe the pessimistic side. It's not completely so bad, but...
Thanks. Anything else? Okay, so on a cheerful note, we'll now convene and we'll move to a section of looking at the nice posters we have here. One of them will be also presented remotely, so each of the posters can have like 5 minutes presentation next to the poster. The persons can stand next to the poster and present it. And then we'll have like just round tables discussing something about how the network, the day's network could look like. And we already like made a lot of progress, I think, in this discussion of all these wonderful topics that you raised. And thank you a lot for this input. Yeah, thanks everyone.